Welcome to Pi International Education. In this video, we will be learning about the usage of the colon, which is a punctuation mark, and we'll be looking at the different rules and circumstances which will help us answer questions in the exam based on the colon. So what exactly is the colon? The colon is basically this punctuation mark where you have two dots, vertical dots, and there are different ways in which we use the colon. So let's take a look at a few of them. Number one, the colon is used to extend or expand on a sentence. What does that mean? It means that when you want to show that a second part of a sentence is being used to add some detail, to extend the meaning of a sentence, or to expand and elaborate or give more information about the first part of a sentence, then you use a colon after the first part of the sentence. Let's look at an example. Here we have a sentence, I value one virtue above all others, colon, honesty. So here, the first part of the sentence is giving you some information, and then we have the colon, which is followed by the word honesty. Here, honesty is being used to extend or expand on the first part of the sentence, right? Because it's telling us which virtue this person values, which is honesty. So here, we use a colon to introduce that expansion or to introduce that detail. Let's take a look at the second way in which we use colons. Colons are used when the second part that is coming after the colon provides an example, an explanation, or a definition of the part that comes before the colon. Let's take a look at these one by one. Let's take a look at first how we use a colon before we set an example. Here we have a sentence. John mentioned his favorite cuisines, Japanese, Thai, and Vietnamese. So here, the first part of the sentence is telling you that John mentioned his favorite cuisines. And then we use the colon followed by examples of the different types of cuisines that he likes, right? So the colon is being used before we give the list of items or the example of the part before the colon. Let's take a look at the usage of the colon before we give an explanation of something. Here we have another sentence. I don't like eating too many sweets. Colon, they make me feel unwell. So here the colon is being followed by an explanation of why this person does not like sweets, right? So the first sentence is giving me a statement that I don't like eating too many sweets. The part after the colon is giving me an explanation of why that is. So sometimes when you want to show an explanation, or in the previous example you want to show an example of something, we use a colon to introduce that example or explanation. Let's take a look at the example of how we use it before a definition. Here we have a sentence. Let's take a look at how we use definition and the usage of the colon. So our sentence is, my sister has a green thumb, colon, amazing gardening skills. So you can see here, my sister has a green thumb, and the part just after the colon is giving you the definition of the word green thumb, which is amazing gardening skills. So when you have a definition of a word just before the colon, then we can also use the colon before the definition. So let's take a look at the next rule for how to use colon. Let's look at rule number 3 now. We use the colon to introduce a list. So let's say we have a list of items. We use the colon just before the list of items starts. Let's take a look at an example. I am available on the following days, colon, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. So here you have a list of days on which the person is available, and you have used a colon before introducing that list of items. Rule number 4, we use the colon to introduce quotations. Similar to how we would introduce a list of items, if you have quotations from any specific source and you want to introduce it in a sentence, then we can also use a colon. So let's take a look at an example of this. It's difficult to disagree with Zappa, who said, art is making something out of nothing and selling it. So here we have the quotation, art is making something out of nothing and selling it, and we have introduced it using a colon, right? So this is an example of how we use a colon to introduce a list of items and a quotation mark. Now that we know the ways we use colons, we have to be really careful where we do not use colons. So let's take a look at that now. So one way in which we should not use a colon is after phrases like such as, including, for example. Now, the reason why we shouldn't use a colon after these phrases is because these words are already introducing the next part of the sentence. So, placing a colon after these kinds of phrases is a little redundant, or it acts like a repetition, which we don't want. Let's take a look at an example. Here we have the first sentence. He had all the skills of a good teacher, such as patience, enthusiasm, and excellent communication. Now, you can see here clearly that there is already an introductory phrase such as. So we don't need to use a colon in this example. How would we correct this sentence? He had all the skills of a good teacher, patience, enthusiasm, and excellent communication. We've just removed the phrase such as, and we've kept a colon here. So this is how you can correct the sentence and remove the repetition of using a phrase that's already introducing the sentence, or we can make the choice of keeping only this phrase and removing the colon. Let's take a look at the second thing where we have to be careful with the usage of colon. Another place where you have to make sure you do not use a colon is after a preposition or a verb that introduces a list. So you have to be very careful. If you have a preposition or a verb, then you do not place a colon after it if what follows is a list of items, right? Let's take a look at an example of the case where we have a preposition. Rashna has won dance competitions in India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. You can see here that the word in is a preposition, right? So using a colon after the preposition is incorrect. You will not use a colon here. So what would be the correct form? You just remove the colon. Rashna has won dance competitions in India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. So we have not placed a colon because there is a preposition before it. Let's take a look at an example of the verb. The next example that we have is of where we should not use a colon after a verb. Let's take a look at an example. The three primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. Here the word are is a verb. So you cannot use a colon after it. And the way to correct this problem would be to remove the colon. So here the corrected form is the three primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. There's another way in which you can correct this sentence. You can actually change the wording up a bit so that you remove the verb before the colon. So here we have, there are three primary colors. Here we have used the colon, red, blue, and yellow. So just before a list, when you have a verb or a preposition, you do not place a colon. Let's take a look at another important rule. The third place where we should not use a colon is after a dependent clause. This is very important. So colon is always placed only after an independent clause, which is basically a group of words that can stand alone as a separate sentence. A dependent clause is a group of words that cannot stand as a separate sentence because it's incomplete. Let's take a look at an example to understand this. She wanted to know about the date, time, and venue of the event. Here you have to check what kind of clause is before the colon. Here the first part is she wanted to know about. Can this part of the sentence stand as a separate sentence on its own? It cannot, right? It's incomplete. Therefore, it is an example of a dependent clause. So you should not use a colon after a dependent clause. So let's take a look at how the sentence can be changed to make it correct. There were a few things about the event she wanted to know. The date, time, and venue. So you can see here, the first part is there were a few things about the event she wanted to know. This entire part before the colon can stand as a separate sentence. It has a full meaning, right? Therefore, it is an example of an independent clause. So using a colon after the independent clause is correct in this situation. So we've taken a look at the rules for the usage of colons. We've also taken a look at where we should not use a colon. So I hope you understood all of these rules and you can remember them and make sure that you practice. I will see you in the next video.